We're covering passage 2. This is a research passage. We know it's a research passage because it says experiment 1, experiment 2 has an image. Usually you're going to have a question about the image in these. So the way to approach this is to skim the reading, know the differences between the two experiments, and then get to the questions quickly. You do want to try to see the differences because you're probably going to have a question about that. But you don't need a deep understanding, a basic understanding. I like to try to be to the questions within about 30 seconds. So take a moment, familiarize yourself with this passage and the experiments before moving on to the questions. Suppose if why questions, any question that begins with these words, lets you know that you're going to have to think a bit, reason some as you answer the question. So if another trial had been performed in experiment 2, 450 milliliters of the liquid had been measured in the cylinder, the temperature of the Diet Cola would most likely be. So we are using experiment 2 and we're doing another trial at 450. So that puts the temperature here, right? So it's going in this direction. And that means the volume is going in that direction, sorry. That means the temperature is going in the same direction, so the temperature is increasing. So it's going to be greater than 60 degrees, so the answer has to be J. Number 9 is another suppose question. So suppose trial 6 had been repeated, but the bottle of Diet Cola had been opened and left undisturbed at 25 degrees Celsius for 12 hours before it was attached to the apparatus, with the mass of CO2 produced in this trial likely to be greater than 0.969 or less than. So it already produced 0.969, and if you leave a bottle open, you're going to have less CO2 because the CO2 distributes. The CO2 bubbles flow out of the bottle. So and that's just a cola going flat. So it would have less because the concentration would decrease over 12 hours. So the answer has to be C. 1 millimole of CO2 has a mass of 0.044. How many trials resulted in the production of at least 1 millimole? So when we look at the production of CO2, all of these are greater than 0.044. So that's at least 4. And all of these are also greater than 0.044. So that's 4 more. So 4 plus 4 is 8. So our answer is J. According to figure 1, so we're looking at figure 1, which of tube A and B, tube A, tube B, if either had at least one end submerged in the liquid before the clamp was removed? So we can see tube A here, tube B, and we can clearly see that tube B is submerged, and we can see that tube A is not submerged. So using the picture, we would say tube B only, but we can double check that in the reading. And in the reading it says one end of tube B was inserted through one of the holes and submerged, so we know tube B, and the other end of tube B was placed in an empty cylinder. Another tube was inserted through the other hole in the lid, so it is just through the lid, and we can see it's not touching, so our answer has to be B. Is the relationship between the volume of liquid in the cylinder at the end of the experiment and the mass of CO produced a direct relationship or an inverse relationship? So a direct relationship would be as one thing gets bigger, another thing gets bigger. As you're making cupcakes, if it takes 3 cups of cupcakes, 3 cups of sugar for 4 cupcakes, if you add more sugar, you get more cupcakes. 4 cups of sugar would equal about 5 cupcakes. And so one thing gets bigger, the other gets bigger. An inverse relationship means as one thing gets bigger, the other thing gets smaller. As you add more people to paint a room, it takes less time. So if you have 3 people painting a room and it takes 2 hours, if you have 6 people painting a room, it will only take 1 hour. So in this one, we just had to figure out the relationship. And I'm going to use table 2 because these numbers are already in descending order, where in table 1 you have this one number 631 out of place. So as the volume of cylinder increases or decreases. So they're using the word increase here. So I'm going to say as it increases. What happens to the mass of CO2 produced? It increases as well. So that is a direct relationship. As the volume measured and the cylinder increased, the mass also increased. So our answer is F. Consider these steps that were performed in each trial. According to the procedure, these steps were performed in what sequence? We're going to have to go to the reading for this. If we look at our answer choices, we have 3 and 4. We just have to figure out which one happens first. And it says a certain solid substance was inserted into the other end of tube A, and the substance was secured by a clamp. Tube A was then attached to a freshly opened bottle. So the solid substance happened first, so we know C and D are out. So we're going to eliminate C and D. And then we have to see, well, what occurred second? Or we could also look at what occurred last, 4 or 2. So 2, measuring the liquid in the cylinder. And that, I believe, was the last thing that is done. And it says the volume of liquid was measured in the cylinder after foaming had ceased. So 2 is the last, so your answer has to be B. Assume that room temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. How many trials was the Diet Coke tested at a temperature lower than room temperature? So how many occurred at a temperature below room temperature? So here we see 1 below room temperature. So 1 trial in table 2. And how many were in table 1? Let's see. They were all performed at 3 degrees Celsius, so that's 4. So those were all below room temperature. So 5 total. So your answer is H. So there are about 3 research passages per test, about 6 to 7 questions per passage, and they usually take about 6 minutes a piece if you plan to finish the test. Reach out if you have any questions.